Well, welcome to week 4. We will be talking about the essentials. So part of functional nutrition is understanding, right? Like really what are the bare bone essentials to really get you started. And then also a conversation around creating sustainability with balance and ease. So I want this process to be a introduction to a lifelong journey for you. And I want it to be in a way that you feel like you have balance in your life and that you can live with ease. So kind of the holistic view of ease, right, is waking up feeling well every day, feeling like you can go about your life and feel comfortable and confident in your body. And then the opposite being dis-ease. So yes, turning into full-fledged diseases, but also just that feeling of kind of murky, unwell, fatigue, bloating, right? Like the unease and the dis-ease that can come with many symptoms that some of you are experiencing. And then so bringing these tools all into a full-fledged practice to create the sustainability aspect of functional nutrition. And so I am excited to share all of this with you. I apologize that it is later than the original scheduled date because of all of the technical difficulties I was having last week. But thank you all for bearing with me and for reaching out and for the one-on-ones that I've had so far. It's really, really amazing to work with you on an individual level, and you know that I am here for you if any of you want to schedule those one-on-ones or move further and take this really a step deeper and work with me for longer term one-on-one. I am offering 20% off all of my packages until December 24th. So through Christmas Eve, really as a gift of health for you or any of your family members. So if you are feeling like we've just touched on some of the information over the past 4 weeks and you really want to dive deeper into your specific situation, please let me know and let's get you scheduled and signed up with that 20% off, whether you want to do it right now or in January when the new year starts. So with that being said, I will start sharing my screen and we'll dive into week 4. All right, so week 4. Sorry, the technical side of things. So like I said, really using the essentials to create balance, sustainability, and ease in your everyday life. And so I want to kind of jet back to what I shared in the webinar that you attended and kind of dive into a little bit more detail around these before I talk about the sustainability aspect. And so this is kind of just an eat this, not this slide, right? So I want to take a few minutes to reiterate why I really want you to focus on the foods in this left-hand side column. And so leafy greens as a part of each and every meal if possible. And really the idea behind this is leafy greens are providing so many of our vital micronutrients that we didn't touch on a whole lot, but what we did touch on is the necessity for those micronutrients to be part of a lot of enzymatic reactions to help support your immune system and keep your gut healthy and provide antioxidants to really help with the detoxification process. And so things like spinach, kale, arugula, lettuce, all of your leaves are really important to add in every single day to make sure that you are getting all of those micronutrients in a way that your body can then really support you on an ongoing basis. And I usually say try to add 1 cup. You don't have to make these just big salads and eat salad all the time, but if you're having, say, spaghetti squash and a sauce for dinner, right? Like I tend to just grab a big handful of spinach, put it underneath the cooked spaghetti squash, add the warm sauce, then it kind of wilts and you're not then getting in a lot of raw, salads, especially as we go into the winter, but you're still getting in your leafy greens. So if you want to steam these, if you want to saute them into dishes, if you want to just add hot food on top and have them wilt a little bit, wonderful ways all to get in those really important antioxidants and phytonutrients that are so alive in the vibrant, bright, dark leafy greens that are available to us. And then these colorful fruits and vegetables, so same thing. I've heard, you've all heard, right? Eat the rainbow. And what's so true about this is, again, those micronutrients and then also phytonutrients, which is something we didn't really talk about over the past 4 weeks, but they are compounds in the colorful foods that really provide support to our immune system, our detox pathways, and our ability to keep an overwhelming amount of health in our cells of our body, right? So going down to the cellular aspect that is so fascinating to me in the study of nutrition is really making sure that we get those phytonutrients and micronutrients coming from the colorful fruits and vegetables. And then we did talk a lot about our omega-3 fatty acids in terms of many things. So the anti-inflammatory effect that they have on our body, as well as the support for our brain, our healthy development of hormones, especially for us ladies, and for our ability to maintain a steady blood sugar level and make sure that we're eating for optimal energy. So making sure that you are taking in those omega-3 fatty acids. And I generally say, about a serving to 2 servings with each meal. And so you can think about the wild-caught fish, walnuts, flaxseed, hemp seeds, things like that. So really being diligent about making sure you're getting those omega-3 fatty acids with each and every meal. And then, so sea vegetables. So things like dulse, kelp, spirulina, wakame. I have more of these added because they're really, really high in minerals. When we think about the sea, right, you can think of just the mineral content of the ocean, if you will. And something that is really important to make sure that your body is in homeostasis is allowing your minerals, so sodium, potassium, and then of course we have magnesium and iron and things like that, zinc, that we want to make sure are supporting once more our immune system and our system of detoxification, as well as keeping our water retention and the ability for the exchange of cellular activity to happen at the correct rate. We really need to make sure that we have an abundance of minerals. So those sea vegetables are really, really rich in a wide variety of minerals that are really easily absorbable for our body. And then our grass-fed and finished organic meat and dairy. And so, a little plug for quality of food here. What we kind of learned about, especially in our conversation around detoxification, is the overwhelming amount of toxins that we are exposed to on a daily basis, not only through our food, right? And so just through our environment and through living in the society that we live in today. And so being really careful about what you're putting into your body in terms of animal products and dairy products helps to reduce the amount of toxins that you have the choice of taking in. And then, of course, we see actually a really fairly different range of amino acids and fatty acids. So those are the protein chains and fat chains in grass-fed, finished organic meat and dairy products versus conventional. And so we see a higher rate of those omega-3 versus the pro-inflammatory omega-6 that we've talked about avoiding. And then we see actually a different range of our proteins or amino acids in those really high quality organic raised animal products. So I want you to consider that as you are grocery shopping. And of course, we all have budgets that maybe allow or don't allow for us to make all of these choices. And so I want you to just kind of have in the back of your mind the experience of understanding why it's important to buy organic and grass-fed when you can. And talk to your friends and family about this. Go down to that cellular level about supporting your body's ability to detox on an everyday basis. Go, deeper into talking about eating for energy and understanding that we need those vital amino acids and fatty acids to support our immune system and support the health of our gut. And that provides longevity, really, and I like to consider it, preventative healthcare in the long run. And then our fermented vegetables. So really keen on making sure that we have our probiotics, going all the way back to week 1 when we talked about gut health. And then overall healthy fats. So things like organic grass-fed egg yolks, avocados, coconut milk, organic grass-fed butter or ghee, and then our sprouted nuts and seeds. And again, a strong focus on really high mineral nuts. So Brazil nuts, macadamia nuts, almonds, walnuts. And then our bone broth. So if you don't follow me on Instagram, I do share a lot of educational information on my account, and you can just search, I believe my name is arose_wellness, but I actually just shared kind of a little recap on why bone broth is so important in the human diet. And it's not just trendy, it really is here for good reason. And bone broth is really, really high in amino acids, vitamins, minerals, things that animals store in their bones that help them support our bones, our cartilage, our gut, our immune system. And so the process of slow simmering bone broth is really, really nourishing, especially as we transition into the winter season. So if you are not familiar, feel free to check out that post and maybe consider adding bone broth as kind of your multivitamin into your dietary strategy going forth this winter. And then more of these herbs, right? The basil, oregano, cilantro, parsley, rosemary, that help support our everyday ability for detoxification, those metal detecting herbs, as well as really support our immune system as they provide antioxidants and phytonutrients and help once more with the ability to provide us with a healthy immune system, healthy gut, and healthy detoxification pathways. So that's my poll for what are the essentials that I should be looking for to include in my diet every single day. And then when you look more into the meal strategy, right, we know that I want you to be really focusing on high quality protein, healthy fats, and then fibrous foods coming from our carbohydrate group, those being, leafy greens, nuts, seeds, and some starchy vegetables to provide that dietary fiber to help feed our probiotic beneficial bacteria and help with keeping your large intestine, your small intestine, your overall gut really healthy by providing that cleansing system so that you can then eliminate waste through bowels and continue to allow beneficial bacteria to flourish. And then talking about this right-hand column, so the less of these. And if you can remember in the webinar, I really hit home that food additives are chemically created. They're food-like ingredients. They are not foods, and they are added to processed foods during the course of their production, really to enhance the flavor, the texture, the color, the shelf life, right? And if you can just kind of remember anything about food additives, they are not food. And when we consume food-like substances that are not food, our body doesn't know what to do with it and how to process it. And that leads to a great deal of overall inflammation and a challenge for our immune system. And we know how important our immune system health is. And so it's just really important that you have an awareness around this list of foods, and maybe even go ahead, screenshot this, type it out, carry it with you, and start reading the ingredients list on our food labels, right? And so I think that I talked to you about making sure that you're not only reading the nutrition facts and looking at how many grams of protein, fat, sugar are in the foods, but really going deeper and looking at the ingredient list. And I'd even prefer you just read the ingredient list over the nutrition facts label. So looking for things like aspartame, sodium nitrates, MSG, any food coloring, BHT, BHA, and then looking for those hydrogenated vegetable oils. And they'll probably say partially hydrogenated or hydrogenated. Even if you see canola, corn, soybean, margarine on list of ingredients, have a little bit of hesitation there. Think back to the pro-inflammatory effects that those foods have on our system, and just kind of take inventory and ask yourself if you want that going into your body. Same with our high fructose corn syrup and the other list of really highly added sugars that are added to most foods, unfortunately. And then things like guar gum and xanthan gum, which are kind of binders and fillers that are unfortunately used in so many products, especially products that are advertised as healthy. So you'll see them in a lot of protein powders or bars, things like that. And, you know, it's one thing to have that in moderation once in a while, but when you are consuming a product that has those in it at all times, I start to worry about the integrity of the product, and also just the ability that it's going to have on the longevity of our whole system. And so things like xanthan gum in particular that you'll find a lot, it's kind of this question of what is even in it, right? And unfortunately, you might remember me saying this in the webinar, but it's not really disclosed how it's made. But the science is actually lending us to believe that it's likely extracted from something like GMO wheat, corn, or soy. And so a lot of people that have a sensitivity to gluten, yet eat like gluten-free bread or something, 99% of the chances are there to be xanthan gum in that bread. And then people end up having reactions to gluten-free products because they have these other fillers in them that we may think to be healthy, right? Because we're eating gluten-free or in a way that we've been told will support our body, yet we're not diving deep enough to really understand these other additives that are in those food products. And so just becoming really aware of kind of where these things may be hiding, and when you can choose to, you know, take in those things in moderation and understand that, you know, we're human, we're not striving for perfection. But again, if you are really working to eradicate some of the symptoms that you're experiencing, taking a break from consuming all of the processed foods that may have these additives in them is going to be really helpful for you. And unfortunately, they hide in things like alternative nut milks, you know, alternative chips and cookies, baked goods, ice cream, crackers, and really, really prevalent in a lot of the foods that are labeled low fat or low sugar, or even gluten-free, or have other health claims on them. Because when you take something out, right, like a naturally occurring product that actually works chemically in food, such as gluten, as rising and binding, or, you know, dairy or eggs, you have to add something in to fill that void. And what's happening is that as we take out those real foods that may, yes, be negative for some people, we're filling those voids with some of these food-like additives that are actually more negative, you know, for the greater public. And so it's just tricky, and I want you to be aware of and start to make sure that you have an understanding about the quality of these substances going into your body, and then the overall effect that these foods can have in the long run. And again, you know, it's not an issue if you have it once in a while at all, but just having that awareness around what's going to happen if I consume these every single day for the entirety of my life, and how is that going to affect my immune system and my gut health. All right. So then looking at the essentials in terms of cooking, eating, and shopping. So this is a big part of understanding how to bring those other functional nutrition pillars into your life. And so in terms of cooking, I recommend really focusing on seeing if you can use more moist heat cooking methods. So those being poaching, steaming, stewing, braising, even simmering, especially as we transition into the winter season. So winter is, right, like drying and cooling. And so something that we want to do is work to combat that really dry feeling that we have in the wintertime by bringing a little bit of moisture in. So cooking in the crock pot is wonderful. Steaming your leafy greens so that you're not getting them in the raw, but that you're still, bringing those into your diet. Poaching even eggs, poaching meats, things like that. Long, slow cooking, braising is really great because it adds a little bit of moisture, and it doesn't actually affect the enzymes in the item that you're cooking quite as much. So we're not going to go too much into detail here, but something that happens when you heat food, right? There is a conversion of chemical reactions that happens when heat is involved in anything. And so sometimes that destroys nutrients in food. Sometimes it actually enhances nutrients. So things like tomatoes, as an example, lycopene, which is an antioxidant that is really prevalent in a lot of red fruits and vegetables, is in tomatoes. And we heat tomatoes, the lycopene becomes a little bit more active. So it's one example of just, a gentle saute or warming up of a tomato actually enhances the absorption capacity of that strong antioxidant. But then you have things, that actually take away when we provide high heat or dry heat to some of our meats and vegetables. We lose a little bit of the nutrient content, which is fine. There are lots of nutrients. We can't retain everything, but just to let you know that if you start cooking for longer at lower temperature and using some of these moist heat mechanisms, you can retain a little bit of the overall nutrient value of your foods, as well as provide some moisture to your body during the wintertime. And then soaking, sprouting all nuts, seeds, and grains, legumes. And this is a process, right? And so I don't expect you to all of a sudden just decide this is something you are going to do, but I want to explain to you the reason behind why I suggest that I do it as well. And so nuts, seeds, grains, and legumes, they are all plant foods. And if you think about their kind of structure, they contain anti-nutrients in their cell walls in order to protect themselves from predators. So if you think about just our fight or flight mechanism as humans and as animals, right? Like we can get up and run away from something if we want to or need to, hopefully. Plants, on the other hand, right, don't have that ability to get up and run. So they have these anti-nutrients that, over decades of evolving, formed in their cellular wall in order to provide, basically, a good way to think about it is a little bit of a not so good taste to predators. So if the wheat strand is out in the wild and birds are coming to eat it, or whatever is coming to eat it, there's going to be something in that cellular wall that doesn't provide a very pleasant experience for that predator. And the reason being so that they can sustain in the wild. But those anti-nutrients that are present bind up a lot of the nutrients that are then available for us to absorb. And with those anti-nutrients present, can often lead to that bloating, gassy feeling that a lot of people experience with various nuts, grains, and legumes specifically, and provide a little bit of irritation to our gut wall because it takes the body a lot of time to break down and break through those anti-nutrients in the cellular wall in order to access the beneficial nutrients that reside in those plant foods. And so when you soak, sprout, and then activate the nuts and the seeds and the grains and legumes, you do the job of breaking down that cellular wall and activating the food while you then neutralize and remove a lot of those anti-nutrients so that the body can just take in and thrive by absorbing the nutrients that live in those foods. And so the process that I do, especially for my nuts and seeds and legumes, is for about 24 hours, I, just throw a cup into a bowl with filtered water if possible, and add a little bit of an acidic medium to help break down those anti-nutrients. So you could add a little bit of lemon juice or apple cider vinegar, and then soak for about 12 hours, depending on the food in particular. Sometimes it needs more, sometimes you can get away with 8. And then you'll start to notice it's, it's softer, it breaks down. And then if you then leave it in that bowl, you drain the water, leave it in the bowl for another day, you'll start to see it sprouting a little bit. You rinse it. I rinse it usually 3 times a day, and then just leave it on the countertop as it continues to work its magic and activate. And then you actually see sprouts form. And then from there, it's in full activation. It's, literally ready to be absorbed in your system. And then you continue with the cooking process, especially for those grains or legumes, or for the nuts and seeds. I then dehydrate them, or you could throw them in the oven at a really low temperature so that they're in their raw activated state, but they're much easier to absorb. And so I can't stress this enough, especially if you are vegetarian or vegan and getting a lot of your protein and fat sources from nuts, seeds, specifically, and then proteins from, grains and legumes. And overall, really, it's going to help with a decrease in bloating and indigestion of any of these foods, and really give yourself the ability to feel like you're actually getting all of the nutrients when you eat those. And then batch cooking weekly. So just in terms of the sustainability of eating healthy on a regular basis, right? If you have large amounts of a healthy meal in your fridge waiting for you when you get home, it's much easier than coming home in a pinch and not knowing what to throw together in order to sustain your energy and feel nourished. Eating warmer foods in the cooler seasons and cooling foods in the warmer seasons. So a little bit of an Ayurvedic perspective here, but as I just kind of talked about, we tend to be drier and cooler in the winter time, and providing our body with that balance of then warming, moist foods in the wintertime is really supportive for our immune system. And then opposite in the summertime, when we're a little bit overheated, and providing the cooler foods to help keep our body in balance. And that helps keep an easeful state in your system on kind of that homeostasis level. And then kind of similar to batch cooking, I guess, just cook, so that you have leftovers. And then eating tips. So, kind of rules of the digestion that I spoke about a few weeks ago: eating slowly, chewing your food really well, letting your body know that food is coming, letting those digestive juices and your stomach acid kind of come into play so that you can actually break down your food and then absorb it, and eating in that calm, quiet, technology-free zone, which allows you to really fall into your parasympathetic nervous system, your place of rest and digest, and allow you to absorb and utilize all of the food coming in. And then shopping tips. And so I want to share these with you because I do believe these to be, part of this essentials in making sure that you are kind of bringing all the pillars of functional nutrition into play. But I also want you to consider, maybe you bring in 1, 2, or 3 of these and, start small. You don't have to focus on everything at one time. I don't want you to feel intimidated by these tips. And so, and like I said, we're all human, it's not like I practice these tips every single time I go to the grocery store, but they're things that I too strive to bring into my routine on a daily basis. So shop local as often as possible. And this really being that we have greater nutrient value in the foods that are growing closer to home. And there's actually a lot of research that says that our bodies actually respond better to foods that are produced locally. Shop for foods that go into meals rather than snacks. And so a lot of people ask me for grocery shopping tips, and I think we get a little bit preoccupied in the grocery store by looking at the tempting packaged snack foods that are so prevalent, even if they're considered healthy, right? But I want you to go to the grocery store with a grocery list to prepare meals. And when you are preparing your meals with nutrient-dense foods, using the standards of protein, fat, and fiber in each meal, you won't need as many snacks because you're going to feel fulfilled and nourished just by eating your 3 meals every day. Read the ingredient label. So rather than that nutrition facts list, not that it's a bad thing to read, but I want you to really look at that ingredient label so you can focus on making sure that you're not taking in a lot of those food additives. And then using the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15 guide. So the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15 is a project that the Environmental Working Group puts out each year, and they do a lot of research around what are the safer foods to eat conventionally grown and what are the foods that you really want to make sure that you are eating organically grown or raised because of the amount of toxins, chemicals, hormones, antibiotics that are used to produce that particular item. And so if you just Google the Environmental Working Group and look up the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15, it's a really helpful tool. That way you don't need to break your budget every single month trying to buy everything organic, and you can start to understand why it's useful to buy certain foods organic and other foods you can get away with buying conventionally. And then, yeah, using the bulk section for your nuts and seeds, legumes and grains is a lot cheaper than buying them, in a packaged way, and also gives you the ability to then to say, oh, maybe I want to try amaranth and just buy a cup instead of buying a whole bag, testing it out, practicing that soaking, sprouting, and activating process, using things in smaller quantities rather than wasting money spending something in a very large bag and then feeling like you won't use it. Always make a shopping list. I mean, this kind of goes, funny thing to share because I feel like most people know this, but when you go and then your mind gets a little excited around the things that you see, you end up straying from the meal planning, the batch cooking, your health goals, because everything looks so good. And so really just making sure that you have something to stick to when you go to the grocery store is a helpful tool for each and every one of us. Working towards shopping seasonally for fruits and produce especially. And don't be afraid to buy the frozen fruits and vegetables when they're not in season. Actually, the nutrient value in those is often, larger because they're picked and packaged at their peak seasons and not sitting on the shelf or traveling from, Mexico to get all the way here and things like that. So just making sure that you kind of have an awareness around what's seasonal and making sure that you are doing your best to buy the organic seasonal produce, and then also, maybe supplementing with some frozen fruits and vegetables, especially in the winter season. Buy mostly foods with no label at all, and then spend some time shopping. So to be honest, sometimes I spend 2 hours going to various grocery stores, checking out the different deals where I can find, the higher quality, more organic fruits and vegetables and meats and dairy, get the better kind of bang for my buck, understanding kind of what and where my food is coming from, starting to get to know your grocery store. And so really, consider that it is a really valuable experience to your health and your relationship with food to build a foundation even around the process of shopping for food. So I have some, clients that love shopping and some clients that don't like shopping, and just be aware of your energy going into it and try to, as much as possible, really have a positive relationship with this experience and kind of get excited about the possibility of really fueling yourself with nourishing food while you shop. All right. So that was kind of the basic conversation around what are some of the essentials and how to bring those into practice, right? And now I want to shift a little bit and talk about the sustainability, the balance piece, and making sure that you have some tools that will not burden you, but actually be able to create this lifelong change that I think is really an important aspect of functional nutrition and overall human health. And so kind of putting these essentials into practice means understanding why you would act or why you would not act. And so I like to use this framework, and this is created by Gretchen Rubin, and she calls this the 4 tendencies. And it's almost like a personality, one of those Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram. But basically, she's done a lot of research into creating this tool so that we can really work on the level of behavior change. So creating any amount of health change, right, is creating behavior change. And so I want you to take a minute, maybe grab a pen and paper. You can explore this later too, but I want you to kind of identify which of these 4 tendencies you are. So the first one is an upholder, which means that you meet outer and inner expectations. So you meet my expectations and your own expectations. An obliger means that you meet outer expectations, but you resist inner expectations. So maybe you are able to listen to what I expect of you and put that into play. But if you wanted to create change by yourself, you would resist it and have a really hard time doing so. And then a rebel means that you resist inner and outer expectations. And a questioner means that you resist outer expectations, but you meet your inner expectations. So maybe everything that I've said over the past month, you're like, I don't know. But if you have this gut feeling that you have to do something for one reason or another, you'll be able to put that into play and meet that expectation for yourself. So knowing why we act and don't act is really critical in reaching your own health goals. So kind of like I said, in order to create the sustainability over long term, we're creating shifts, right? And so you may be wanting to shift something right now and create this health change, and understanding why or how by looking into the tendency that you have to create that behavior change is a really, really useful tool. So just kind of notice over the course of the past 4 weeks, as I've been giving you tools to work with and pull from, I haven't been creating the change or plan for you specifically, right? That's the work that I actually want you to do so that this can be sustainable for you without me constantly checking in. At the same time, this is why I have many, many one-on-one clients, because some people want the constant support and accountability, right? And they want me to tell them and give them a plan, and they can stick to it. If I, say, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to eat, and this is how to do it. You might be in that camp. You might be someone that totally resists that. So just consider this as we move on, and as you think about kind of bringing some of these principles into practice that I've shared with you over the past 4 weeks, how to best create behavior change for you and your life. And if you're like, listen, I need that one-on-one support, remember that I'm offering 20% off all of my one-on-one packages, and I'd be happy to meet with you and figure out exactly what kind of a plan you may want moving forward. You can also look up Gretchen Rubin and take her quiz online if you're a little bit unclear about kind of the brief amount of information I just shared. If you want to explore this further, you should do that. But then really understanding your why, right? So why, did you sign up for this course? Why do you want to manage your symptoms? And what then is a good way to eat for my body in order to do this? So there's no one reason, there's no one plan. And I really think that hopefully you're seeing that by this point in the course. But there's a why, right? So for you, there is a why. And that's the first piece of the sustainability puzzle. So why do you want to make this health shift? And I really am going to say that the sustainability will come as long as your why is coming from a level of internal awareness rather than an outsider view. So getting rid of that social narration of you should do this or eat this or be this, right? Like not coming from an I want to necessarily look different, because that's an outside perspective. Even if it's coming from your brain, it's coming from an outward lens of physical looking at my body, right? But if you want to feel different, that's another thing. That's that internal awareness. And that is really coming from a place where you can create the long-term, sustainable change, because it's coming from that deep internal level. And maybe it's pain or symptoms that are so bad and unmanageable, right? And that's your why. And that's great to discover. And just know that it will shift as you evolve, right? And so continue to have kind of an open understanding and experience of questioning and kind of this internal inquiry around what your why is and why you want to create the sustainability change. And then balancing with grace. So once you I guess I like to say kind of the balance often comes after you learn something about yourself from a little bit of control. And so I really work towards creating a more intuitive eating approach with my clients after they figure out what works and what doesn't. And that's kind of the whole kind of picture behind the functional nutrition is understanding these pillars so that you can bring them into play in your body and understand how they're working for you. So when understanding something about yourself, you can look back and then become more aware of things. And I've already heard from so many of you, wow, I didn't realize that caused me bloating, or wow, now I actually understand that I have less fatigue and more energy eating in this certain way. And that came from a little bit of control, right? It came from managing your food choices. But then it also came from kind of integrating these pillars and actually taking a pause. So this invitation for pause, right? Eating slowly, taking time out of your day to listen to these recordings, thinking about the information. Just the slowing down gives you that ability to have a little bit more balance in a graceful way. And then this focusing on the good, not the bad. So I spend a lot of my time with each client focusing on what to do more of, rather than food should be something to be feared and it's bad, which is just not the case, right? And you know, in the beginning of this conversation, I talked to you about food additives and what we want to move away from. But the majority of functional nutrition is focusing on what foods are functional for the body and why, and focusing on the positive aspects of those rather than the negative aspects of those. And then this idea of accepting that your path may change. At different points, our bodies have different necessities, and understanding that season has different effects on our body, understanding that ease can come, dis-ease can come, dis-ease can leave, and accepting that there needs to be a little bit of fluidity in your approach to this balance. And then resisting the urge to attach meaning to it. So I guess the biggest thing here for me is, if you find yourself wanting ice cream, eat the ice cream and move on. Don't label it as bad and get down on yourself and then go into this downward spiral of then pizza and candy and more ice cream and cookies, right? Because that then really has a negative effect on the body if you decide not to attach meaning to a choice that you've made. Research shows that you can really accept and move on and stay on your plan and balance your goals, making this a long-term shift if you avoid the need to attach negative meaning to each and every choice that you make that's straying from your plan a little bit. And so this is where the intuitive piece comes from, is being able to say, you know what, I actually really want that. I'm going to eat it. And then tomorrow's another opportunity to move on, right? To nourish my body in the ways that I know how, using these pillars of functional nutrition. And without attaching negative meaning, you reduce that amount of stressful hormonal response coming from internal and external sources that then bring you down that negative rabbit hole. So I hope that maybe you screenshot these, maybe you write these down, and you really begin to bring these layers into your everyday as you continue on this path of sustainability. And then something to just touch on here is social support. And so, one of my questions in my intake form, which most of you have sent back to me, is, do you have social support in your life? And this is really important, because when people make us feel, right, or draw attention to the way that we're eating and act as if that's a problem, we lose connection to ourselves, and we really lose the ability to stay with our personal plan. And so I just ask, can you communicate with these people? Can you say, you know what, I'm doing something really positive for myself. And you don't have to then go into, the reason why. So an option is to really communicate with these people up front and say, this is for me. I'm creating a lot of internal awareness. I'm creating a lot of healing on a deep level in my body, on the cellular level, by bringing in these these pillars, of functional nutrition. And that's okay. The other option, and I do this a lot, is I don't go into my story. Like, I give myself permission to just like, oh no, thank you, or I'm not hungry right now, and stick to my gut choices as long as it feels really good physically and mentally for me. And so I think we feel like we need to justify ourselves all the time. It's kind of human tendency. And I just want to give you permission to let go of that need to justify, especially going into the holiday season. Sometimes not getting into things with people that you're around makes these efforts a lot more easily on that social happen a lot more easily on that social level. It provides a little bit of less judgment from people, maybe from others towards yourself or from you towards yourself, and just allows you to continue on this path without second guessing. And then just know the priority for yourself and let that be the guide. So coming back to your why, coming back to your health goals, coming back to these pillars, and really letting yourself guide the way without that kind of second guessing all the time that comes because we're human, but just trusting that you are on this path because you want to feel better in your body. And that's really important, not only for yourself, but for the relationships that you have with everyone around you. And then a little bit of conversation around habit hacking. And so, something that we haven't talked too much about, because we've been really kind of focusing on the science behind the foods, but basically creating new habits takes a little bit of forming new pathways. And so you've taught your body and mind to function in a certain way, which is true. We do that. And then you can create new pathways that go into your kind of established patterns and figuring out how to build then new habits around those new pathways. So kind of monitoring a habit without punishing or having feelings of guilt, right? So the need to balance both pieces of the puzzle to feel happy. And on one hand, accepting yourself, and on the other hand, expecting more of yourself. So I think this is kind of this tedious mind game that is played a lot when you're trying to create health change. And only you can know, really. But I want you to kind of consider what are the true boundaries around your kind of nature that you can't go out of, and then where you should really push yourself to expand your possibility. So kind of asking yourself the question, is it really you that's wanting to stick to these goals? Or if it's not, if it's not going to stick, then let it be and let go of whatever you're trying to achieve and transition to creating a new habit. And so sometimes that means lowering the bar to set yourself up for success. Okay. So example is focusing on one health goal rather than trying to eradicate 5 health goals at one time. Another example is starting with 5 sun salutations if you want to start bringing in yoga into your practice every morning, right? You don't have to say, I'm going to practice for an hour. And then comes this idea of how can I set myself up for success so that I feel positive, and still then strive for that next step. And that's really kind of where this monitoring habit without punishing yourself comes in. Oops. And I want you to just kind of know, if your time and energy is spent better on doing certain things than it's spent on kind of telling yourself you're not doing things right. And so that's a conversation that you may have with yourself a lot, and just kind of creating a level of happiness and results by establishing a new habit and getting comfortable from it, and realizing that this is beneficial for you or it's not beneficial from you, and being okay with that. So not attaching the meaning if you decide, you know what, this habit is not serving me on a mental or physical level, and that's okay. So kind of going back to this personality type from Gretchen Rubin, right? Noticing if you find solutions to help bring you into balance, and if it's aligning with internal expectations or external expectations, and how you can create the full picture and how you can really create the way to make it work for you in a positive way. So as you begin to create new habits, I want you to consider, forming new pathways, setting yourself up for success by maybe lowering the bar a little bit and being okay with that. Like less is more, people. Like we are on this like treadmill for life, and we're not getting anywhere if we're constantly setting ourselves up for too much, right? So lower that bar a little bit. Create habits that you can really support yourself in rather than punish yourself in. And then kind of like this idea of macro versus micro monitoring I talk about. So when it comes to nutrition, any monitoring is better than nothing at all. So maybe it's not counting calories or portions or even macronutrients or even focusing on 3 meals a day. Maybe it's just noting down how each meal makes you feel. And that way you can start to hold yourself accountable and keeping you really honest. So noticing what works for you is a really good way to hack habits. You don't have to do what works for other people. You have to do what works for you. And then making it, work on a level that's concrete for you. So make it so you can do this for 5 years, right? Like don't say, okay, I'm thinking of this just on a very minute level, but understanding that functional nutrition is lifelong. And certain health goals are not. Certain health goals, certain healing mechanisms are one foot in front of the other, just get through the day. So recognizing if that's where you're at, or if you are kind of at this piece of sustainability and just wanting to understand how to kind of monitor at the grand level and kind of a greater scheme of things. And then choosing from a way where really understanding how and why your body works and why it feels that way. And that's the tuning in process. That's the journaling. And then, of course, there are a lot of ways to be healthy. Maybe you switch it up every now and then. Just using this mindful technique of monitoring your body, monitoring your symptoms so that you can increase your internal awareness is really going to be what's overall helpful for helping you to decide how and when to change habits and how it feels beneficial to create new habits. And then if you're no longer served by what you're doing, that's a good indication that it's time for a shift, right? And these, creating these shifts are not defined by anyone else but you. They're not defined by me. They're defined by what you need for your body. And then I love this, just habits made holy become rituals. So we tend to view rituals, I think, in this kind of sacred, positive light, where we tend to view habits as having like a negative connotation. So whether it's a walk after dinner or brushing your teeth right away so that you don't snack later, like allow it to kind of in your mind's eye be recognized as a ritual so that it has this really positive light reflecting on it rather than a negative light because you think it's just a habit, right? So coming into this idea that habits made holy become rituals, and rituals are going to help create the sustainability of these long-lasting health shifts, and especially help making sure that you are that these essential practices can really be long-lasting. And then a consistency piece is really honoring, when to eat when you're actually hungry, creating these rituals for mealtime and focusing on satiation during rules rather than during snacks. Striving for simple meals that you can make in 30 minutes or less. It does not have to be super, super duper complicated. And then, just meal planning, prepping and eating your leftovers. So I find the consistency piece to be a huge part of the conversation around essentials. And that is really just coming back to the bare bones of eating when you're actually hungry, creating the rituals around your meal times, and really planning and prepping for simple meals. And then eating and establishing a schedule that works for you. So we talked about having 3 meals a day. And eating on a regular basis really prevents extreme hunger that can wreak havoc on kind of your resolve to eat better overall. But for you, if eating 5 smaller meals a day is just what works for your hormone, for your gut health, that's something that you need to accept. Is that, the view that works for me and my body? Not so much. But again, if you have any additional body stress coming from the fact that you might be pregnant or breastfeeding or an extreme athlete or recovering from any sort of illness or disease, you need to recognize that having a little bit more influx on a regular basis may be what works better for you. And then just this idea of staying fuller for longer. So eating your protein, fiber, and fat at every meal and snack so that you make sure that you really work to reduce those overall sugar cravings and keep your blood sugar steady on that basis will be really, really great. But again, recognize that this is for you, not for me. And then just these ideas of creating kind of the least barriers to a healthy lifestyle. And I talked about this in the detoxification conversation, but really something I want to bring to light is anticipating upcoming stress and setting yourself up for success. Recognizing we're going into the holiday season, what is extra on your plate, and how can you provide a little bit of tools, like really, when can you relax? When should you do extra meal prep? When should you say no? Kind of scanning that kind of mental landscape and using language in terms of, I want to do this, or this is not going to support me and I need to say no so that I can be a yes in other areas of my life. And just understanding that it's okay to set yourself up for success going into areas of increased stressful situations. And then shoulds lead to shame, like really recognizing that the more you use that word should, and the more that you then don't do whatever you should do, the more natural reaction you are going to have to shame yourself. And it's like, just don't should on yourself. I hear this said all the time, don't should on yourself. It's like, don't shit on yourself in the way that shoulds really make you feel like you should do more than maybe you should. And we want to do all that we can to alleviate any sort of shaming on ourselves in order to create this long-term health. And then a little bit, just something to bring into light, this abstinence versus moderation, especially going into this holiday season, recognizing for you if some food triggers are better if you're better with those foods in total abstinence, or if you can moderate. And I'm an abstinence person. Like, I can't have certain sugary foods or grains because it leads me into a really downward spiral of reactivity, of negative emotion, of increased dietary symptoms, especially in my GI tract. And yet I just know that about myself, so I choose abstinence. Some people say, you know what, I can actually have one cookie and be great. And if you're in that camp, I commend you, and I think it's wonderful, and I think that is part of what creates a really healthy lifestyle. So just a little bit of, again, that internal awareness and taking inventory around, are you better at abstaining, or are you good at moderating? And then least destructive ways to monitor. So base your day on how you feel versus numbers. So versus counting calories versus getting on a scale, things like that. And then where is it helpful versus where does it drag me down? So questions to ask yourself of when you're monitoring habits, when you're monitoring your symptoms, are you coming from a place of kindness, or are you coming from a place of judgment? And making sure that you are able to monitor in a way that provides helpful information and helpful tools for you then to create these behavior changes. And then I've kind of already talked about this, but just quick kind of getting back to the beginning conversation around essentials. Meal prep is really important. So my 6 strategies here, or 6 kind of steps that I go through, are I take inventory of what I have. I choose recipes that I want to work with. I create my shopping list. I batch cook. I plan my meal prep time. So I choose if I'm going to spend all my time Sunday doing things, or if I'm going to say, okay, Monday I have a little bit of extra time, so I'll roast a bunch of root vegetables and I'll do a chicken in the crock pot. And maybe that's Monday. And then Tuesday I can kind of use some of that pulled chicken and those leftover vegetables. And so I have that planned out. And often for me, the meal prep works better in staggered times throughout the week rather than 2 hours on one day on the weekend. But that's a personal preference for me. And then include indulgences. So whether that's, a little extra fruit, whether it's some sort of a baked good that actually has a lot of protein, fat, and healthy fiber in it. That way you're actually, working towards health goals, but still feeling like you're getting a little bit of a treat in. So whatever it is for you, that's included in your meal prep so that you can still stay on track throughout the week without feeling deprived. So here's just a sample meal prep plan, and on your membership site for this week, I will have a meal prep menu up there for you with a guide. That way it's like step-by-step directions for how to create all of these meals in a 2-hour time window so that you can set yourself up for success for the week. And then before we end, just coming back to your health goals as a big piece of, why this is essentially very important and why and how we can help create this in a sustainable way. And so just ask yourself this question: do you want to achieve your goals because of how you feel physically? And then on a scale from 1 to 10, ask yourself, how important is it to reach your health goal? Because if it's like a number 1, then maybe right now is not the time for you to have this focus, and it's just bringing you down because you feel like you should, and then you're shaming yourself for not doing it. But if it's a 10, you should have a real wake up and say, okay, you know what? I need one-on-one extra support, or I really need to take all of these tools that I've learned on functional nutrition and implement them into my daily life so that I can start reaching my health goals. And then, of course, we have just this 80-20 rule. And so getting clear on your why, checking in physically and mentally, and then understanding too to give yourself a little bit of grace. And if you can implement all of these strategies 80% of the time, and 20% of the time you can have a little looseness and forgiveness with yourself, that's an amazing place to start. And then if the change feels good physically, but it's causing a lot of stress mentally because you feel restricted, you really should give yourself permission to ease off, because the stress effect of creating change is more detrimental than a lot of the physical symptoms that you may be feeling. And then, the 12-hour eating window, I can't kind of stress this enough, how giving yourself 12 hours is an amazing tool to give your digestive system a chance of rest. Really helps reduce overall inflammation, which we know is a systematic issue for so many of these chronic diseases, and for a lot of the health goals that you are all working on. Really helps boost cellular activity and gives your body a chance to burn fat. So if there's any takeaway that you can take for kind of creating a little bit of sustainability and one essential of functional nutrition, it's working towards a 12-hour eating window. So eating your meals between maybe it's 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., and then fasting between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. So eating all of your nutrients within 12 hours, and then resting your digestive system and fasting for 12 hours. And then leaving you with, it may not be easy, but let it be simple. So it's part of your life, but it doesn't need to be your entire life. And I just assure you, without question, just consider that, yes, it may not be easy, but let it be simple. Have that be a mantra that you just wake up with every morning as you strive towards creating this change that you wish for in your body. It may not be easy, but let it be simple. And that is all that I have for you for this 4th week of our functional nutrition course. I really sincerely hope that you all have gained a lot of useful tools, again, so that you can act and really create the change that you desire for yourself. Please, of course, let me know if you have any questions or concerned. If you'd like to take advantage of the 20% off one-on-one deal, reach out to me. And we still have our bonus session on balancing blood sugar. And as soon as I can identify a time that works for all of you to actually attend live, I will go ahead and get that scheduled. So once more, thank you so much for working with me over the past month. And I hope that you all have a wonderful day and wonderful busy holiday season, and I hope that it's really healing and provides health for all of you. All right, thank you again. Talk to you all soon. Bye.